I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Welcome to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chemi. Today, we're talking all about content, the written word, and what that means for so many companies who are trying to get their message out there without it being so salesy, without it seeming like so much of an obvious advertisement. How do they use the right form of writing in all its functions? How do they use content to get their message out there in a way that's actually going to drive sales and revenues and brand equity across their stakeholders? So today we're joined by two of our crack staff here at Bospar, Paula, Joann, Whitcher, who I think you two are the most experienced content writers here at the company. So I feel very overwhelmed because you two are much smarter than I am. You actually write for a living. You have to understand the technology for a living. You don't just BS talk about it like I do. So I'm very thrilled to have you on, but I'm a little nervous that I'm not a heavyweight enough to be here in this room. So thank you both for joining me. And I'm going to start. I'll start with Paula. What is the biggest mistake that you see from clients when they come to you and say, okay, I'm hiring you for content strategy, but now do X, and X is usually just something that's not going to work for them. What is the first thing you have to tell them about? That's not going to work.
Well, I think that one of the things is, it's very easy to, be very focused on promoting your company, promoting your product, but really to have contributed content that is interesting to media, interesting to readers, and really sets you up as a true thought leader. You need to really look beyond your own product and company and think about the larger context. What are the problems that people are facing? How can you use your expertise to help them, solve these problems, alleviate these pain points, and really look at it in the larger context of, the technology, but also like, what do I need to do within my own organization to get the buy-in, to get the alignment? What questions should they be asking? That kind of thing.
Joann, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things that we find a lot of clients are they're afraid of making any kind of bold statements or coming off as controversial, and of course you don't want to be offensive, but I think showing that you're taking a stand is very, very interesting and intriguing, both to your readers and to the media.
You said, of course you don't want to be offensive. Do you ever run into situations where a company would be offensive?
Well, sometimes they might want to denigrate a competitor in a way that, comes off as unprofessional. So that would be something we would watch out for, but that does rarely happen.
Is that a successful strategy? Oh, go ahead, Paula. Go ahead.
I will say that, when a competitor, especially if it's a bigger competitor, is talking about you on social media, for example, and this is exactly what happened with one of our clients. Mm-hmm. IBM was kind of talking in a veiled way about this client. And we said, gosh, they're talking about you. That's kind of interesting that a big company would be talking about an upstart. And we use that to, kind of say, hey, this big, Goliath is talking about us. And it sort of, in a way, validated our client that such a big competitor would be so worried about them, that they really have something to offer. So we leveraged that, not as much through contributed content, but through social media. And it was a big success.
There's so much getting published every day, right? We know that you can't keep up with it. So what separates a contributed article that gets published that's going to be widely shared from so many that fade into obscurity? Think about how many headlines we look at. We don't even click on the article, right? Let alone the headlines we don't even see. And everyone's pushing this out there. What do they need to do to actually resonate?
Well, I think the commentary that's both of the moment and new. Editors and readers in general tend to like contributed articles that relate to the news of the day and bring something new and sometimes controversial to the conversation. Opinion pieces that run counter to the general consensus, but are not like too crazy far out. are often appealing to editors and, really get conversations going, get people commenting on those articles. Also, it's helpful if, some of the viewpoints are validated, supported by data or, supported by some sort of third-party source. Joann, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of mentioned this before, but I think any content creator who's worth their salt knows that if something comes off as promotional, chances are it's not going to get widely shared. And as Paula mentioned, when you're sharing your perspectives, you want to make sure they're unique or even counterintuitive, they're timely, they're actionable, maybe they offer a solution to an ongoing issue. You don't want to give just generic advice or a perspective that just jumps on the bandwagon of what everyone else is saying without adding something new.
I like what you said. You want to be able to disagree, be a little controversial without being so far out there, right? Finding that balance of, hey, you're adding to the conversation, you're adding to what people want to talk about, but in a way that's somewhat believable, right? Like, oh, I can disagree, but I need to disagree within the frameworks of reality.
Exactly.
Before I started working here, when I heard content, to me, content was everything, right? Content was earned media, it was social, it was paid media. Like, to me, content, it's videos, this is content, writing is content. Why is it that when we say the word content now, we mean, oh no, we just mean the written word. We mean contributed articles. We mean, ghostwritten pieces. We mean these kinds of things as opposed to all of it. Where did that come from? Because it took me a while to figure that out. And I think there's a lot of prospects and clients that hear the word content and they don't necessarily know that in a way it has a technical industry jargon that we're using it for here.
Right. Well, I think content is everything, but I think that we make this distinction in talking about contributed content. It's an article that publishes under the client's byline that we then provide as a contributor to a media outlet that also has internal reporters. So that's kind of how it works in my brain, but you're absolutely right. And I think that integrated marketing and PR strategy should include all of those things: video content, social media, written content, and everything else that goes along with a successful PR program. And Bospar delivers all of it and provides alignment between all those different platforms and formats.
How do you balance something that's truly authentic thought leadership, but you balance it with the company's brand agenda, right? So I know so many companies, they want to just say, hey, I'm contributing an article about how we're great, but then it reads like an ad. So then go buy an ad, right? But that's not a news article. That's not a useful piece of contributed content. So how do you take out all the overly promotional stuff and weave it in a way that is actually useful to the reader?
Do you want to take that one, Joann?
Yeah, sure. I mean, always we're trying to focus on educating readers, offering solutions, sharing industry insights about trends. I mean, there is a way to weave in mention of the company within a broader context, perhaps by highlighting a case study, sharing proprietary data like from a survey or lessons learned. But even that I would do sparingly. But always, even without mentioning the company name, you're always tying the narrative back to the company's objectives.
Right. And I feel like also, navel gazing, whether you're having a conversation with somebody or whether you're, providing some materials in a written format, it's just never attractive or particularly useful. So again, true thought leaders look beyond their company's product services to understand and analyze the broader context and why things are the way they are and how people might approach things in new and better ways. And they use the experience that they've gained through their time at their companies and the way they've developed their products to inform that.
And the whole point of thought leadership is that you're trying to build trust with your audience. So if your content is overly promotional, there goes the trust.
I see. Because that was going to be my question is do you see any metrics or ROI or some proof that, hey, if you're not promotional enough, you're not going to move eyeballs, but you're actually doing it from a trust measurement that if you're too promotional, then you accomplish nothing. Is that right, Joann?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, the metrics could be like when you see posts shared on LinkedIn.
Right.
You're not seeing promotional pieces shared on LinkedIn. You're seeing things that add value to the conversation.
And but do those turn into future sales? Like, does that end up moving the needle for fundamentally what the big picture is of why they brought you on? Like, can you accomplish the goals without explicitly telling the audience what you really want to tell them?
Yeah, I think when readers, kind of recognize your expertise and your authenticity, then they'll seek you out. They'll seek out the brand, right? They'll go to the website. So yes, we have seen that, and they'll engage with the company.
And also, companies can use this kind of thought leadership and this guidance highlighting their expertise for lead generation and their, email outreach to customers. And all that goes back to what Joann was talking about, building trust. And building trust might be with like a prospect, seeing that you're out there, you're talking about the issues that they care about. So that might enable you to win business, but it could also consultative content could, help existing client realize that you also have expertise in that other area that they may have not been aware of. And, that might be an opportunity for a tech business to upsell that client on an additional service or product.
You mentioned tech clients, right? So much of what we focus on is technology. There's this huge gap of technical writing and the ability to understand the technology, write about the technology. But then for a lot of the readers, they may not understand the technology and they may never need to understand the technology because they're the buyer. It's like, hey, I just need you to solve the problem. I don't need to know how it all works. How do you, from an outsider's perspective, how do you write at a technically high enough level that is going to satisfy both sides, right? The potential reader and the company that you represent, who presumably wants the technical stuff in there because that's a lot of their secret sauce. Their competitive advantage is the technology.
I mean, you got to know your audience and figure out their level of, where they are in terms of technical know-how. It never hurts to compare complicated technical concepts with things with which the readers are already familiar to aid in understanding. It's important, like, to avoid getting lost in the bits and bytes of technology conversation. If you're writing for an engineering journal, it might make sense to include a fair amount of technical detail. But if it's for like more of a business audience or, folks that are not as deep in the weeds technology wise, you can kind of talk about the technology, but in the end, it's all about like what results the technology delivers, right? So for most business, tech, and sector discipline specific media outlets, the best approach might be to like include the most important technical details, but then explain how they relate to the broader context, like impeding or improving user experiences, preventing or driving business growth, enabling scalability, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, when you're writing about technology for businesses, the business isn't really interested in the nuts and bolts of the technology. They want to know how it's going to like drive their business results or make their lives easier, right? So, and as Paula said, you want to use things like analogies or relatable examples, avoid industry jargon that they may not be familiar with. Make the tone of the article maybe more conversational, less pedantic, really so that it's very to the reader. And then you could also think about how you want to structure the content, like make sure, break it up into smaller digestible sections so that it's easier to follow, and use bullet points, visuals, that kind of thing.
Do you find there's a lot of pushback between you and the company that you're representing in terms of, hey, I know you want to say all these things, but I'm going to suggest that we take all these things out. What's a typical editing process like on the back and forth? Is it they have a draft, then you edit, or you have the draft and then they give tweaks? Or what is typical?
Do you want to take that one, Joann?
Well, I don't know if there's a typical process.
Okay, what's the process that you really like, and what's a process you really don't like if there's no typical?
Well, the best thing is having great intake. So having a client that is really going to be forthcoming during the discussion and has a vision and really communicates that vision for what they want the piece to be.
An intake is you basically sitting there and interviewing them,
right.
asking them all your questions. They tell it to you, and then you turn that into an article.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. I call it we're like friendly reporters. We're not going to do any gotcha moments, but we want to understand. Right. So, I mean, if you start with that, you're in pretty good shape. Wait, I forgot what the question is.
There's so much AI right now, right? And like, I use it myself for certain kinds of things, asking it questions. I use it now to track my recipes, like my food intake. I take a picture. It tells me, hey, this is how many calories you're eating just from the photo. Like, it's crazy. And obviously we know what it can do for writing. Does it scare you because companies think, oh, I don't need professional content. I can just give 3 bullet points and AI is going to spit out for me some kind of contributed content. I'm sure you're having these conversations with prospects.
Well, it's interesting. I think that, like you said, AI enables companies to churn out content at an unprecedented pace. But, with all the content competing for everyone's attention, it just means that stamping out cookie cutter content is not going to be a winning strategy. So I think that while AI can help, authors make their writing stronger, if you're struggling with a headline or what have you, that can be really useful. But, having a real point of view and sharing that in point of view in a unique way, and maybe with some like personal examples and really bringing your personality to it, is really what makes content stand out. Whereas AI, I think, is more, often more very generic.
Yeah, I agree with Paula. I think you can tell most of the time when something is AI generated because it doesn't sound like a human wrote it. There's no nuance. The language is very two-dimensional. The same language is used over and over again. For instance, I see the word navigate in a headline and I'm thinking AI. Now, I know that's probably not true, but AI uses the word navigate like constantly.
But it's funny because it means people used to use navigate, and the AI
right, well, that's
from the
why.
people.
And so they don't look to use a different word that means the same thing. The AI isn't using idiomatic expressions or similes. It's just, to me, it just doesn't have any depth. I mean, it's a great tool, but that's what it is. It's a tool.
Do you two think you can just pick up, like you said, Joann, if you see an article, do you think you could tell right away, oh, this was an AI article?
And I have done it. I mean, I have. So, it's something I've done. I've read things that have been provided by clients, and I'm like, this is AI generated.
Oh, they gave it to you, and it was obvious to you that they just had AI write it. Oh, that's funny.
And
so
then we do, and we help them rewrite it. We have to, recraft.
How much AI are the two of you using in your own work? Like, I know Paula mentioned, it can help you with a headline, for example, or it can help if your writing is weak and you want to make it stronger. Would you two even admit to using AI on this podcast, or if you used it, you're not telling anybody?
I've used it in a limited way. I have been using it lately to help me, write really compelling headlines. Never with navigate in it, though. But
please write in your headline, but don't use the word navigate.
So really, that's how I typically use it. I know that some folks like to use it to generate outlines for articles. I don't really use it much in that way. It is nice, sometimes it can automatically suggest how to tighten up a sentence or something like that. That's like a nice little capability. things like that. Or even if like before you're going into an intake call with a client and you know generally what they want to talk about, but they don't have like a real tight beat on what the exact angle is. It's just helpful to go in and use an AI tool to say, like, what are people talking about relating to this issue right now? And then you like can talk about that and say, hey, what do you think about this? This is a big topic right now. And that can like help inform the questions for those intake calls.
I see. That makes sense. And then before we go, last question for both of you. What is an underrated storytelling technique that more brands should be using in their content? Like we've talked about, don't be promotional, be a little controversial, but not be too crazy. Don't use AI and say navigate because it has no nuance. Like, is there an underrated technique that you find that you're always using that maybe your competitors aren't or companies don't realize that they should be doing more of?
I think maybe showing vulnerability.
Oh, I like that.
Really powerful. It's something that will resonate with readers. You're showing that, maybe you had a challenge or a failure and how you, overcame it. So I think something like that can be incredibly impactful.
Right. For building trust, like you were saying earlier, the whole point is to build trust. If you can admit we made a mistake, or we tried this, it didn't work, or here's how we learned from a past failure. That certainly,
right. And it's like revealing humanity, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes very relatable.
I think that, starting with what's in the zeitgeist and then kind of drilling down to the message and the advice is frequently the way to go. But I'm also a big fan of the Wall Street Journal lead. And of course, that technique kind of starts with an anecdote about a specific person or situation. And, and it makes it very personal. And then, you can talk about how that's illustrative of a larger trend that you want to approach in the article.
So you can use that even in contributed content. I never thought about that because I think of that as certainly a newspaper article kind of thing, but I wouldn't have thought of it as in this medium as well.
Right. If you can get the client, convince them and get them to, plumb the depths of their experience, that can be an interesting and really compelling approach.
Okay. Well, I like it. Paula, Joann, thank you so much. I actually feel like I learned a lot here today, just thinking about that. I was never a good writer as a kid, right? So writing was always my hardest part. So it's always impressive to talk to people that do this every day full time. And I like what you said, Paula, about sticking with the zeitgeist. I know somebody who came into journalism after being a professional athlete, right? So they were in a whole different world. And what they learned was you need to talk about what everyone else is talking about. You can't just show up here and start talking about something else and try to make that a headline. Just talk about what's already a headline and you'll start to get more buzz that way. You'll start to be part of the conversation, like you said. So it's interesting to hear that full circle here. But Paula, Joann, thank you so much. Appreciate the time today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you to my guest and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week and we'll see you next time.